Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Lane Sullivan, President of Park Cities Republican Women, and I want to welcome you all tonight to this wonderful event. We're getting started a little bit late because, well, gosh, Martha McCallum from Fox News called and she wanted to interview Charlie, so we let Charlie go to the interview. Anyway, I just want to say thank you to all of you all for being here. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah. We're delighted to have you here this evening. And tonight we're going to celebrate. I know we've had a really rough year. We all have in a lot of ways, but we are here to celebrate. We're celebrating the greatness of our wonderful country. We're celebrating Donald J. Trump, the most wonderful president ever. We're celebrating freedom, and we're celebrating you, all of the great women who are in the audience, because you know what? Our sister suffragettes 100 years ago made it possible for us all to vote. So 100th anniversary of the women's right to vote is 2020. In addition to that, we have had a banner year in Texas, so thank you very much for keeping Texas bright, shiny red. And I also want to mention that we're celebrating our young people. And many of them are here tonight, and we're delighted that you came out on an evening when you probably could do something else, but you're here with these adults. But you're going to be really glad you came because Charlie Kirk, who is leading the great conservative movement in our country, is our distinguished speaker. And so we are thrilled to have him. So, dinner is coming soon, but before we do that, we need to bless the dinner. And so Lisa Luby Ryan, who was president of Park Cities Republican Women 2006-2007, is going to do the invocation for us tonight.
That's a long time ago.
Well, that was my job.
That's great. If you would bow your heads, please. Lord, we thank you for this time together. This evening we gather in your name and under your authority. Father, your word says, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and I will forgive their sin and heal their land. We ask you to forgive and heal our land, Lord. We have wandered from your word and from your guidance. We have allowed power and position and money to become the gods of our country. Please forgive us for the national sins that have been declared legal by many of our courts and legislatures. Forgive us, heal us. I stand before you with my fellow patriots, humbled, fearful, confused, uncertain, and yet hopeful. You guided our forefathers to establish a just and good country, a country of law and order, a country that is land of the free and home of the brave. And though we are a country that was founded on your word, we have wandered. We are a people who love life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But Father, we want each person created by you to have the same freedom. Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. We want your freedom, Lord. We are also people who will never give up on faith, our God-given rights, our Constitution, our families, our first responders, our military, and the truth. It is the truth that sets us free, and we are a people that will fight until our last breath because we are a people who believe in liberty. Father, we lift all of our elected officials up to you today and petition you to give them wisdom, courage, and conviction to do what is right for our country. Our forefathers all paid a large price, but they honored and feared you more than they did men. Let the holy fear of God once again fall on our country, and let there be revival. And Father, we lift our president and vice president up to you today. Please continue to give them strength, courage, wisdom, and knowledge to make the right decisions. Give them the stamina to continue to fight the good fight for America. And Father, the world is watching, and they're counting on us to lead the way. The way America goes truly affects the way the world goes. And God, we ask you for your favor. We ask you to be gracious unto us. We ask you to restore America so that your name will be great among the nations from the rising to the setting of the sun. And you have told us, Lord, that it is what is good and what you require of us to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with you. It's in your name we pray.
Well, I think that's clap-worthy. And okay, on your program tonight, it says National Anthem, Texas Senator Angela Paxton. Well, this is not Angela Paxton standing to the right. She is home with her daughter and grandbaby that was just born on Friday. So she sends her regrets and wishes she could be here, but the singing senator is going to be replaced by the singing husband of our incoming president, Jenny Gilchrist.
Would you please stand for their national anthem and join me? Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. No, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. Thank you. Be seated.
Thank you so much, Tom. That was absolutely wonderful. And as Tom Novak is making his way to the stage, I just want to introduce him because Tom and I met. Well, Tom is a judge. He's a 366th District Court judge in Collin County. And it was about 8 years ago, that he ran for Dallas County DA. And there was an extra seat at our table, so they just slotted him in. And boy, was I the lucky one, because Tom and I have become very good friends. He's also been legal counsel to me on a personal matter. So I am thrilled to introduce our recently elected Judge Tom Novak. Come on up, Tom.
Thank you, Lane. I just wanted to say thank you to everybody here in Collin County. We had a great turnout. We had a great result, and it's all in part thanks to people like yourselves who helped us get to that point in time. We're very proud. I won with 12% of the vote, and so that's what we want to see happen in Dallas County. That's what we want to see happen everywhere else in Texas, and so thank you. And if you would, please stand and join me in the pledges to our great nation and our state. As many of you know, I'm an immigrant and an Air Force major now, so I would appreciate you joining us. If you are of the armed forces, please salute, and the rest of us, if you would, place your hands over your heart and join me in the pledge to our great flag and our great nation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now to our great state, our home, and the home I'll be here forever, by the way. Join me in the great state of Texas and our pledge to our flag. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank y'all so much.
Okay, there's one more thing between us and dinner, so if I could just have your attention for one more minute, please. It is my great pleasure to introduce Rodney Anderson, who is the Dallas County Republican Party Chairman. And while he's making his way up here, I wanted to mention to you and brag a little bit about PCRW, our wonderful Park Cities Republican Women's Club. We were the beneficiaries of the 2020 Club of the Year award that I got the honor of receiving from Mr. Rodney Anderson. So thank you very much for that.
Certainly welcome. All right, guys, we're gonna have a little bit of fun tonight, but I did want to I want to introduce our public officials that are here, and I know you just met the Honorable Tom Novak. When I met Tom, we were both on the campaign trail years ago, and I will tell you that you are now elected. I am now not elected, but that's a whole nother story. But in all sincerity, we have some fun. Tom here is one of our judges. We have Senator Bob Hall right here in front of us. And I always, if given the opportunity, want to make sure that I introduce the Honorable Tyncee Miller for her many contributions. I don't know if she's right over here. She has been, as most of you know, one of the stalwart supporters of the Republican Party here in Dallas County. And do we have any more elected officials here that we've missed? Because then I'm going to move on to the next category. And the next category are people that are going to be the next elected officials, because there's a gentleman here in this room when I first met about 18 months ago. He and I had a very interesting first conversation. But I will tell you, this is one of the hardest working political candidates in this last election cycle, that as the Dallas County Republican Party Chairman, I am not going to let him get away. And that is Mr. Will Douglas, who is right here. Yes, please stand. I don't know what he's going to run for yet, but I know he's going to run for something, and I'm not going to steal that thunder. But in all sincerity, guys, our elected officials, thank you so much for being here. But I also there are some folks that wanted to be here tonight that couldn't. Folks like Congresswoman-elect Beth Van Dyne. And yes, and the reason in particular I wanted to bring her up, she is one of the members of the freshman class coming into Congress of our Republican women. A lot of folks don't really realize it, but as a county party chairman, I can tell you the backbone of our party are Republican women. And for folks like for the largest class that we have going into Congress in a year where we were not supposed to pick up seats, Beth Van Dyne has the distinguished honor of being, quote, Nancy Pelosi's worst loss. Now, folks, I can tell you there are some things that are really exciting happening. Beth Van Dyne won that race despite $15 million being spent against her. In the state of Texas, we held the same number of state representatives going into the Texas House as we had at the beginning of the election cycle, despite more than $60 million of Democrat money being burned on this last election cycle. And now what we get to do as the Dallas County Republican Party, as Tom mentioned earlier, one of the things we had to do this year is we were on defense. There was a lot of money spent against us. This next year, we get to go on offense. And I'm looking forward to working with every one of you from the Park Cities Republican Women, helping us take back ground here in Dallas County. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Rodney. And now we're going to have dinner. So I'll be back in about 20 minutes, and then we'll get on with our program, and then what you came for, the special treat. Charlie Kirk. Enjoy dinner. Good evening again, ladies and gentlemen. Please continue to enjoy your dinner, but there are some acknowledgments for Park Cities Republican Women that I want to make sure that I make tonight and recognize some important people. First of all, I just want to say Park Cities Republican Women is so grateful to our sponsors, our patrons, our friends, our sponsors, our underwriters. We could not have this fabulous event tonight if it weren't for you, and so we really, really appreciate that. And before you applaud, let me just say who they are. So I'd like to recognize Trinka Taylor, Rita LeBlanc, Lisa Trout, and my favorite, the Chambers and Secker family. Woohoo! Claudia Coker, Kathleen and Joseph Fox, Holly Free, Nancy and Ed Mello, Lisa Luby Ryan, and Wentworth, one of our corporate sponsors. So as we celebrate the wonderful women who are in Park Cities Republican Women who I'm getting ready to acknowledge, I want to mention something that is pretty remarkable, and we did not know this until recently. The Texas Federation of Republican Women, who is the big sister, and then the the National Federation of Republican Women is the mother, and Texas Federation is the big sister. But these are all organizations that we belong to, and we women make it happen. So what I want to tell you is that we were awarded the club that grew the most in 2020 in the nation. So Park Cities Republican Women was recognized for achieving the greatest membership increase in the year of all clubs, and that's pretty remarkable during the pandemic. So that's probably because I give my business card to people in the parking lot at Sam's, and wherever I am. So thank you, ladies, who are here for that incredible contribution. And for those of you who don't know, we have more than 300 plus members, so we're called a super jumbo club. And of course, I want to introduce, well, as some of you know, this is my second term, and we have term limits as president. Yay! And so I have had the great pleasure and distinction of serving with some incredible women. And in the interest of time, I am just going to say, ask them each to stand where they're seated, and let us recognize the hardworking 2021 board of directors who, without their tireless efforts, we would all not be able to be doing this fundraiser, and we wouldn't have gotten all the Republican candidates that we elected. So ladies, please stand. 2021 board members, please stand. And their names are listed on the back of the program, along with the incoming 2021 board that's coming in. So they will be sworn in tonight at a ceremony after Charlie's remarks. So now, there is an important award that was started years ago and named the Betty Marquis Award. And Betty is one of our senior members in our club, and unfortunately she's not here with us tonight, but she sends her best. Betty was one of those inspirational, hardworking Republican women who we all went to for advice and counsel. And so it's a really important honor to receive this award because it's the hardworking PCRW member who goes above and beyond what she's asked to do. And so this year's winner is probably one of the youngest members in our club, and she has the distinction of always saying yes to everything. She volunteers without even being asked. She's managed to bring our club into the 21st century in terms of social media and our, so we have a presence on Facebook and Instagram, and we have a YouTube channel as a result of her. And then she's our videographer. And the other thing that is really so astonishing to me is that she is the one who initiated the Latinos for Will Douglas's campaign and started this movement with, recognizing that his Texas House seat was heavily populated by a Hispanic community. And so she instigated that, and 40 people showed up to their first meeting, and they block walked. I think she worked tirelessly on this event tonight and put together all of these tables and all of the financial aspects of it. And so I want to recognize Pia Lara as the winner of the Betty Marquis Award. Thank you, Pia. And so now on to the featured speaker, Charlie Kirk. And I always like to find something personal that people don't know about the speaker, something little known. Well, that was kind of hard to do, but for those of you who don't know, Charlie is no longer available on the social scene to date. He recently proposed to his beautiful fiancée, Erica Franzvia, who is Swedish, and boy, it'll be a whole lot easier to call her Erica Kirk when she marries Charlie. But before I introduce Charlie, I want to say a special thank you to 3 important people in my life, and one of them is, a couple, Doug and Jackie Deason, who've been very supportive of me, and they, along with Laura Woodall, who's on our board of directors, and also Layla Perney, who is a brand new friend but will be on our board next year, they made it possible for me to actually meet Charlie in person, although I've seen him at CPAC and heard him, and I follow Charlie, but to actually get to meet him. So I'm going to tell you very quickly that we're at this fundraising event, and I waited until all the young people and everybody had a chance to visit with him, and I handed him, I introduced myself and said I was president of Park Cities Republican Women, and he said, "I would love to speak to your club sometime." I was like, wow. And so our board said to me when I told him this story, "Well, did you ask him what he was doing on December 14th? I said, "No, I was much more coy than that." I waited, and then Layla connected me to Charlie. So I'm very grateful to Doug and Layla and Laura for making that happen, so I appreciate that very much. So I am going to really abbreviate my remarks for Charlie, not that I don't want to give him credit for all of these great things, but more importantly, I want to give him an opportunity to really talk and tell you what's going on with Turning Point USA. But most of you should know that he is an author, a political commentator, a radio show host, and that he started Turning Point USA as a national student movement that's dedicated to identifying, organizing, and empowering young people and teaching them about the importance of free markets and limited government. A lot of adults need to learn that too. This is impressive. With 250,000 student members on 2,000 high school and college campuses, Turning Point is the largest and fastest growing conservative youth activist organization in the nation. And one thing that I'm particularly proud of Charlie and his group for doing is the Young Women's Leadership Summit that Turning Point hosts every year, where 1,000 young women fly in from all over the United States just to be with Charlie and hear all the great things that he has to say. But it is a 4-day forum, and it's amazing. I've been, and it's just amazing what he does to help develop these young women who are our future leaders. Okay, Charlie is wise beyond his years. He's only 27. And he has appeared on Fox and CNBC and Fox Business and many, many more than 1,000 times. And probably many of you follow him like I do. And he's also on Steve Hilton's show on Sunday night called Revolution. He was also one of the Forbes 30 Under 30, which is pretty impressive. So Charlie has chaired Students for Trump and worked on at 350 plus U.S. colleges and campuses. Most recently, Charlie, who was telling me at dinner that I should advise my nephew, who's 19, who's been accepted to a Texas university, that he should skip college like Charlie did and just go straight to the workforce, because my nephew, fortunately, is very conservative, and he follows Charlie, and so I might just give Owen that advice. But anyway, most recently, Charlie co-founded the Fall Creek Center for Faith and Liberty, a Christian think tank at Liberty University. So Fall is Jerry Falwell, Kirk is Charlie Kirk. So that is what he founded recently, and they work on expanding religious freedom and advance conservative principles in the public sphere. President Trump and Charlie compete on the number of followers they have on Twitter, as you can well imagine. And then one of the reasons why we're having this as a dinner instead of our typical Park Cities Republican annual Christmas luncheon is because Charlie did his radio show live today at noon, and he's on the Salem affiliate here in Dallas. And then as I mentioned, Martha McCallum interviewed him, so he'll probably give you some insights about that. So Charlie, why don't you come up and take it away?
Thank you. That was probably the most thorough introduction I've ever seen. That's terrific. Thank you for having me. Honored to be here. There's a lot happening in the country. I first want to say thank you to Rita LeBlanc, one of our most generous and amazing friends in the country, to the Trout family, amazingly supportive of everything we do at Turning Point USA, the Deasons. Jackie Deason is an American hero. You really are. I was watching one of the live streams that certain networks have not been airing, and I heard a voice that was very familiar of that very now, I think we could call it infamous, video where all of a sudden they put these ballots under a table, and then Jackie can describe it a lot better than I can, as she was, and I said, that sounds like Jackie Deason. And so then I texted Doug, I said, is Jackie in Georgia right now testifying in front of the Georgia legislature? And it turns out that's correct. You've been doing amazing work in the election fight. And so many friends are here. Yes. And so I will, unlike some other kind of let's just say, people out there that have decided to stop talking about what is obviously the most important thing on everyone's mind, which is what exactly happened in early November. I will dive right into that and help unpack that. And then we'll kind of talk about, I think, some broader themes. I do want to talk a little bit about young people and where we're headed in our country, and I'll talk until they kick me off, and we'll do that. So what happened in early November is probably the biggest fraud ever done, at least in my lifetime, at least in the last 100 years when it comes to elections. What happened in early November, and they told us exactly what they were going to do. They called it the Red Mirage. Things were going to look good on election night, and then all of a sudden, all these extra ballots would start to flow in, and things would normalize in their direction. So let's just start with what all of you are continuously bombarded with from all of your friends and sometimes family members, where they say there's no evidence of widespread voter fraud. So first of all, that is an incredibly foolish sentence to ever even tolerate. Who said anything about widespread? All it takes is 1% to win Georgia. It takes 0.5% to win Arizona. So what would he talk about? Widespread? It probably actually exists. All it takes is 15,000 ballots to not be correctly monitored with signatures. Mind you, they're very clever with how they do their words, the left. You have to give them credit. Because as they're talking about it, they say there's no, which is an objective statement, and then widespread, which is an incredibly subjective statement. How do you define subjective mathematically? How about this? They never say there's no evidence of consequential voter fraud. I've never heard them say that, because there is. There is evidence of consequential voter fraud. And voter fraud happens in a variety of different ways. And you guys know this in Dallas County. We were just catching up with your wonderful Dallas County chair. It happens in a variety of different ways. The first of which is the way that is the hardest to uncover, which is voter registration fraud, which is who's registering to vote. Are people on the voter rolls that shouldn't be there? People that move out of county, move out of state, they pass away, people that should not be registered to vote. Who actually cleans the voter rolls? Now, typically, that's the job of a Secretary of State. Typically, people who are in the Secretary of State position, they want to then eventually pursue a future political office. They're risk-averse people. They're not people that want to dive in and be called all these awful names to go purge the voter rolls. And this is particularly true in Pennsylvania and in Georgia, Arizona, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And so the amount, and you guys saw this when Robert Francis O'Rourke ran for the Senate in 2018, how many people that shouldn't have been registered to vote were registered to vote. I remember I visited University of Texas, Austin, never doing that again without armed security. My goodness, what a cesspool of, by the way, A&M's not that much better, so we can go through all of that. But I think I've offended everyone in the room unless someone went to SMU. I got plenty of time for that too, by the way, so. Anyway, I went, Baylor's another story. I went to UT Austin back in 18. Stacy was there with me, and of course, just the most, I say this, and I've said it before, there's some wonderful people that go to UT, there's some wonderful people that teach at UT, of course there is, right? And however, it is without a doubt, the most aggressively liberal school in the entire country. It's that simple, from my personal experience. And there's videos that have gone unbelievably viral, I could show you them, where they had signs and posters waiting with threats, all sorts of things. Anyway, I remember, that's actually not the point of the story. The point is that I was there and I saw lines wrapped around the corner for people to go vote for Robert Francis O'Rourke, right? And so you go and talk to those people, and a lot of them are saying, yeah, I've never voted before, I'm from out of state. They won't admit they're voting in different states, but a lot of them are recently registered in the last 30 to 60 days, which is where a lot of the influx of the kind of the fraud happens. And so we know this when there's independent analyses done of voter registration and you dive into actually the voter rolls. We know this in Michigan, we know this in Texas, that people move, people obviously pass away, and it takes effort to remove them from the voter rolls. So that's one part, is the voter registration fraud. The second part is what I call ballot laundering, and this is something that was made possible thanks to the the response to the Chinese coronavirus pandemic with our lockdowns, where they now had an excuse to implement nationwide vote by mail, basically. Now, really good states, they stood up against this. Florida is a perfect example, okay? I'm a resident of Florida. Governor Ron DeSantis should go to every single state across the country that cares about election integrity. And Texas did pretty well. I have to say, you guys did better than most states. There's some things you can clean up in Dallas County, but this state was not a disaster. It wasn't. No, you guys have no idea how bad some of these other states are. In Georgia, I asked how many people got more than 5 ballots sent to your home, and almost half the room raises their hands. Right? I mean, they were sending out, and I'll tell you why it happened, because there's actually a really, really good takeaway of how this happened and how we can actually course correct it. And believe it or not, it has to deal with weak Republicans and political correctness. But we'll deal with that in a second. So Ron DeSantis should go around the country and teach states that actually care about voter integrity. Why is it that the state of Florida, that has nearly 1.5 times the population of Georgia, can have all their votes in by 9 o'clock Eastern, and it takes Georgia 8 days to figure it out with inconsistent results? Why? How is that possible? And the reason is leadership. This is why. It's because Ron DeSantis is an actual conservative who loves his country. I think in times like this, it's easy to complain, it's easy to get worried. Let's lift the good people up, right? Let's do a better job of lifting up the governor of Georgia, not one of those people. Ron DeSantis should be lifted up. So what did he do? If you remember back in 2018, he was running for the governor's race against a fraud and actually a criminal, Andrew Gillum. Andrew Gillum was endorsed by Barack Obama, tons of money. They had not won the Florida's governor mansion since 1996, right near there. It's been almost my entire life, Florida's been Republican. And so they spent tons of money. And you remember that it was then Governor Rick Scott against incumbent Senator Bill Nelson, who was very, very well liked. And so Florida was kind of a test case of where the country was. This was during the Mueller investigation. This was 2 years ago. I know it feels like it was 2 decades ago, but it was 2 years ago. And you might remember Ron DeSantis, we weren't really sure who was winning. And Broward County refused to put in their election results. And a woman by the name of Brenda Snipes, who is a complete and total fraud, well known in kind of Florida circles, refused to say how many ballots were left. You remember these famous videos of ballots being put in pickup trucks? It was this unbelievable. It was a black eye on Florida election politics. So Ron DeSantis ends up winning. They do a recount. He wins by like 14,000 votes, which is considered a blowout, right? In Florida, 14,000 votes is you're really doing amazing if you win by that many votes, because Florida always seems to kind of just be 500, 5,000, 6,000 votes. The first thing Ron DeSantis did when he got into office, he said, Brenda Snipes, you're resigning, you're done. Asked for her resignation. Then Ron DeSantis did the difficult but necessary work, and he picked all the correct fights. And he said, I'm going to sue every single Democrat Secretary of State, every Board of Election Supervisor. I'm going to be called all these awful names, but we're going to purge our voter rolls. And the only way you get a ballot is if you request it. That's it. You must request the ballot. And then if you try to vote in person, you can't vote in person. So I'm naturally skeptical, and Ron DeSantis was talking a really good game on this, and Ron's a friend of mine. And so I'm a resident of Florida. I went to go vote in the Sarasota area early. And as I was checking in to vote, a guy comes in and he says, I want to vote. They say, okay, show us your information. In Florida, they require voter ID to vote early. What a concept. And so the woman checks him in and they say, well, sir, it looks like you already got an absentee ballot sent to you. Not even submitted, sent to you. And he said, yeah, I don't know about that. I want to vote. Very suspicious, right? Very dodgy. Well, sir, we can't let you vote here today because we sent you an absentee ballot. I saw this happen in person. And they say, well, I want to vote. And they say, well, you can vote provisionally, but then if we find out that you submitted your ballot, you could go to jail for double voting. A little bit of an argument came and he left. And there I saw right there someone who probably wanted to game the system, checked, balanced, gone. That's how a system is supposed to work. And now Florida, what happens when a system works? When a system works the way it's supposed to, Donald Trump wins by nearly 4 points, not 4,000 votes, not 40,000 votes. He wins Florida by 430,000 votes. 430,000 votes in Florida. How is that possible? It's simple. It's because Ron DeSantis went in and he cleared out the voter rolls. He said, you're only getting a ballot if you request one, and they hawked the voting precincts and the polling places. Now contrast that with Georgia. Now, I'm going to be very honest with all of you here. Just outside of all the evidence and all this, just looking geographically, I refuse to believe that you win Florida by 400,000 votes and you lose Georgia and you win North Carolina. That things change. They don't change that dramatically in 2 years, okay? That sort of stuff, It's what we all of a sudden call, there's probably a crime. We should go investigate it. That's what that's called. And so what happened in Georgia? Happened in Georgia is the exact opposite. Is Brian Kemp won in 2018. Now, Brian Kemp's done some things okay with lockdowns and whatever, okay? He's actually handled it better than most. DeSantis has been better than him. However, Kemp has not been bad on that. But Kemp won. And from the moment Kemp won, Stacey Abrams never lost sight of him. She went and raised $40 million of out-of-state money, hired Perkins Coie and all these ridiculously expensive law firms, came in and started suing and suing and suing. And she had really good arguments. If you actually read the briefs and there were people that, again, they're very emotional stories, but they said that their ballot was never submitted and it was rejected because of signature verification process. Okay, so Raffensperger and Kemp, instead of fighting like DeSantis did and winning in court in Florida, they settled. Now, mind you, they unconstitutionally settled. It's the state legislature that has to change the way votes are done, but they settled. And they said, okay, we'll relax the signature requirements, this variety of stuff that was just a gift to Stacey Abrams. Now, mind you, the thought process for Kemp and Raffensperger is this is a solidly red state. We'll win by 3 points instead of 3.2 points, whatever. We'll make it up in some sort of thing in the future. Now, you pair that with Joe Biden spending tons of money in Metro Atlanta and the most sophisticated voter fraud operation and ballot laundering operation that we've ever seen. Now, the other part of this that, again, I only have limited time, so I could literally talk for 2 hours about this, is the Center for Technology and Civic Life, which was a $400 million infusion of cash from the data billionaires and the tech billionaires. And so there was a 501c3 that was doing about $500,000 a year to try and expand voting access, right? It was practically dormant. No one took it seriously. So then somebody orchestrated this. Who this somebody is, we can only guess. To all of a sudden, Mark Zuckerberg makes an announcement and he says, I'm going to put $350 million into this 501c3 that only does a $500,000 budget. So they go from a budget of $500,000 to $350 million. Now, if you think they're doing that without some sort of assurance that there's going to be something happening in the direction of their worldview, I mean, give me a break. That is an astronomical amount of money to just all of a sudden throw into a C3 that has no proven track record. Now, what did they do with that money? What they did is actually unconstitutional. And this is going to take a long time to unravel this particular complaint, but there's some really good people that are litigating, Phil Klein being one of them, former Attorney General of Kansas, which is that you cannot use private money to supplement the vote counting process. You can't do that. You can't go take 501c3 charitable money and go hire election judges and go hire vote counters or vote tabulators. That's precisely what they did. It's unconstitutional in every single state, and they did it under the guise of the pandemic. But the real coup of what they did is they installed these ballot boxes in every major city across the country. I don't know if Dallas had them or not, but they had them in Philadelphia, they had them in Pittsburgh, they definitely had them in Atlanta. Now, what's the significance of this? Anonymized vote drop places where all of a sudden, if your job is to go collect ballots for somebody, wearing a mask, of course, you can drop off hundreds, if not thousands of ballots, and they get washed. Think of it as if you're trying to launder money. And this is what I always laugh at these people. They say, there's no evidence at all, there's no voter fraud. I say, wait a second. People cheat on their taxes, people cheat on fantasy football, people cheat on video games, people cheat on Monopoly, people cheat on stupid, silly things. And you're trying to tell me when the $4 trillion a year government that controls the greatest army ever in the history of the world to be able to conduct the future of America, people all of a sudden act beautifully, ethically, and all the criminals say, I'm not going to get involved in this? Like, we're supposed to believe that? We're supposed to believe when the ultimate prize is up for grabs, that all of a sudden people say, you know what? I'm actually not going to do it. We have criminals in every aspect of society. Now, voter fraud, like money laundering, you have to look into it. If we just took a drive throughout North Dallas to every laundromat, you wouldn't see the money laundering happening until you go look for the money laundering. Money laundering is a multi-billion-dollar a month, more than that, it's probably multi-trillion-dollar a year industry if you count all the drug trade and the cartel. How do you do it? You clean the money, same way you clean the ballots. So you have millions of ballots being sent out to every single person. And it wouldn't actually take this many people to go do this. It would take probably 50 or 60 hardened criminals that know what they're doing to go scoop up ballots in college districts, apartment buildings, and the kicker, and we can prove this, senior living centers. This is the one we can prove. And this is the one that if we had a Department of Justice, which unfortunately we don't, we're basically operating without our right flank here, this is where all my focus would be. Now we have evidence, not just in the mathematical, we'll get into that in a second, but we have evidence of this woman by the name of Susie, runs a developmentally disabled center in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. She was not allowed to access any of her patients the last 30 days before the election because of a Chinese coronavirus outbreak in her area, but she communicates to them via Zoom. These are developmentally disabled elderly people. So on Zoom, she started to talk to her people that she assists, developmentally disabled, and 20 of them, she said, everyone that she's responsible for said that somebody came in and forced them to go vote for Joe Biden. Now, either she's making this up and she's schizophrenic, or maybe there's something that's worthy of an investigation from the Department of Justice at that living center in Milwaukee. She came out, said it on local radio, Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. It's finally getting national traction. Now, that would explain exactly the missing gap that we see in Pennsylvania. Now, this is a process. I did not come up with this term. I don't love this term. It's just a term that really, you'll never forget it. It's called granny farming, okay? The New York Times came up with this, okay? Again, I don't like the term, but you remember it, okay? It has impact. Which the New York Times came up with it in 2012, which is, again, go read the New York Times diagnosis when they were afraid that Republicans were using vote by mail to win elections. Remember, Republicans used to dominate vote by mail. And Democrats were worried about this, so in 2012, the New York Times wrote a 3,000-word piece of how to spot voter fraud, how to prevent against it, and the investigations that need to happen into it. This is back in 2012, until they realized they could use racial identity politics to their advantage, so all of a sudden you can't even talk about this stuff. Like, okay, you can't talk about it because you're afraid of being called the awful R word. Okay, so in Pennsylvania, there was a sudden, now just think about this logically, 1,774% increase for new voter registrations for 90-plus-year-olds in the midst of a pandemic. This is what we're supposed, if you believe that Biden won, you must accept everything I'm telling you wholeheartedly, no questions asked. I mean, this is a religion. You must, it is not just a religion, it's a mythology is what it is. If you believe this. They say, yeah, okay, so by the way, you dive into it, 38% of them registered to vote online. 90-plus-year-olds in the midst of a pandemic. They took out their iPads and they all of a sudden decided to go register to vote. For the first time. Many of these people have never voted before. What's a more logical belief is exactly what we know happened, is that well-incentivized criminal thugs did the unspeakable. They went after the greatest generation who were isolated, afraid, and at risk, fraudulently registered them to vote, and intercepted their ballots when they arrived and submitted them on their behalf. That's probably what happened. And that would explain why all of a sudden we saw these spikes that were so just unusual in precincts that had shared living centers for people over the age of 90. That would explain that. And by the way, it's in defiance to the national trend. What's so amazing, if you believe the Biden mythology, we're supposed to believe that Republicans won 27 out of 27 House districts across the country that were competitive. The Economist, The Nation, Larry Sabato, and that Nate Silver, who's a total fool. He should be excommunicated from all decent society. This guy, he's a robber baron. He really is. And anyone who dares call out this guy is a professional pollster. He said that Nancy Pelosi was going to get 250 House seats. Okay? She'll be lucky if she gets 222. It'll probably be 221. So he was only off by 38, right? Only. What a wonderful margin to be able to operate from. But it goes from, you're thinking, 244 to 221. Republicans flipped 3 state legislatures, 1 governor's mansion, and did not lose a state legislature across the country, including in this wonderful state, which you guys deserve great credit for. Tons of out-of-state money poured into this state. In order to believe the Biden mythology, you're supposed to believe the following, that blacks and Hispanics grew in support for Donald Trump, except for 3 counties. Except for 3 counties. That blacks and Hispanics in 3 counties that mattered in the swing states that determined the future of our republic, those blacks and Hispanics were like, we hate him more. But the blacks and Hispanics in the Rio Grande Valley or Miami-Dade County or in Chicago, D.C., Boston, L.A., Seattle, Portland, those blacks and Hispanics were like, we actually like him more. If you believe the Biden mythology, you're supposed to believe that all of a sudden at an arbitrary county line, just a county line, There's no trend whatsoever to usual voting trends. For example, Fulton County, Georgia. All of a sudden, the Fulton County line, you can bet dime on a dollar that Biden is going to overperform Hillary Clinton by 8 points. The other side of the line, you go to Fayette County, you go to any of these other counties, Trump will overperform what he did in 2016, like that, like clockwork. Take Dane County, Wisconsin. Anyone from Wisconsin? Anyone? Okay, one person, great. So, it's a couple people. So I'm from Northern Illinois. I know Dane County really well. Dane County is where the University of Wisconsin-Madison is. University of Wisconsin-Madison is one of the most liberal schools in the entire Midwest. When Barack Obama visited, they had hundreds of thousands of people show up. No joke. It was legitimate. It was authentic. Do you remember Obama in 2008? It was real. It was kinetic. You could feel it. You could touch it. It was the most overwhelming political movement, I think, even more so at times than Trump in certain areas across the country. Bumper stickers, yard signs, people that were wearing just shirts for the fun of it. It was the closest mixture of unified sports support, Hollywood, and cultural kind of pseudo-revolution that I think I will ever come to in my life. And I think we all agree with that. But we're supposed to believe that despite all of that, that factoring even for population growth, Joe Biden did 7% better in Dane County, Wisconsin than Barack Obama did in 2008, with the campus mostly closed. And if you dare ask a question, you're a threat to democracy, sit down and shut up. And I know what a lot of you are thinking. Then why hasn't something happened about it? What hasn't something happened? And here's the problem, is that this entire thing is not an accident. Up until people like Jackie, who've been doing unbelievable work, we have just been players in their game. There's a reason why he didn't campaign. There's a reason why they had this whole thing figured out, okay? From the ballot collection, to the voter registration, to the vote by mail, we were all just playing as if this was a persuasion election, when in reality, this was really more kind of who can mechanize politics better. You know, we talk about the Chicago machine, we talk about machine politics. They built a machine, legitimately and real. And so here's the problem. Judges don't want to get involved in this stuff, and they're not going to get involved in it. Judges are not political by nature. They don't like it. They didn't like it in 2000 when they were put in that situation with Bush versus Gore. And as you can see with the Supreme Court, they want nothing to do with it. I think that what your Attorney General here did and many other states was heroic, and they deserve great credit for that. They really do. It was a terrific thing, because not enough kind of remedies or measures were presenting itself. Too many state legislatures have sat idly by and allowed this to happen. Establishment Republicans in Arizona, Georgia, and Pennsylvania have been terrible. Republican Raffensperger in Georgia is defending a broken system, and the more lawsuits, the more investigations, it'll be proven that he was defending something he knew that was corrupt and broken to save his reputation. That's what he's been doing in Georgia. But the problem is this, is that as soon as a Secretary of State sets up certain rules and guidelines, and they determine a quote-unquote winner, the chances of reverse engineering that in the time allotted is increasingly difficult. We knew it was difficult. That's why these kind of arbitrary fights to go cleanse the voter rolls, it actually matters more at times than even persuading the population. To give you an idea, in Georgia, if we would have just had anywhere close to similar signature verification, the Armistead Project, Phil Klein, and other people, and Jackie would know these numbers better than I would, will say that Trump wins Georgia by 70, 80,000 votes, anywhere between that. Might have been 50,000, right around there. If we just would have had the signature verification we had in 2018, let alone 2016. And so a lot of you are saying, well, what's the remedy? What's the remedy? Well, look, there's one final step that has to be taken. The Electoral College obviously met today, but that's not the final step. And the final step is exactly what happened in 1876. And again, this is such a long shot. The chance of this happening is next to nothing. But it still is, it's kind of one of those that you're telling me there's a chance? It's very small. And what happened in 1876 was Rutherford B. Hayes, running as a Republican, was up against Samuel Tilden, who was the governor of New York. This was Reconstruction America. If you think America's divided now, just go back in a time machine and go read your 1876 history. Republicans controlled the Senate, but Republicans controlled the Senate. The chambers were mixed. I think Republicans controlled the Senate. That's right. Republicans controlled the Senate. Democrats controlled the House of Representatives. Now, what's the significance of that? This election was hotly contested. Fraud allegations everywhere you could see. and Rutherford B. Hayes had a singular electoral vote, one electoral vote margin. So the Electoral College meets, but what's the final step that needs to happen? Is the House and the Senate need to certify the results. That's the final step. Now, this is generally just a procedural step. Not since really 1876 have we seen this come up, but what happened in 1876, and it was actually a brutal thing that ended up happening. It's actually pretty much indefensible. But what ended up happening is the Democrats wielded their power for evil, is what ended up happening. Is the Democrats said, okay, we're not going to certify this, but we will put Rutherford B. Hayes as president if you stop all Reconstruction in the South. And it was it's like unspeakably evil, right? So they used their political power by saying, we're going back to Jim Crow laws, poll taxes, segregation, the Democrats going back to their roots, and which they haven't changed. And they said this, and unfortunately, the great bargain of 1876 was brokered. What's the point of the story? Is that the United States Senate, controlled by Republicans, could end up putting up a fight. Now, the chances of getting Collins, Murkowski, and Romney right there, and McConnell of doing that on January 6th, I think we all know what we're dealing with. However, I think that we need to find a singular, so all it takes is this. The way it works, without getting too kind of intricate and technical, is that if one House member, Mo Brooks is going to do it, he said he will, and one member of the Senate objects, it just takes one object, then it goes to a 2-hour debate, and then you have a roll call vote. They don't want a roll call vote, okay? They want a voice vote. They don't actually want to go on the record about this. And this is where it actually matters. We have to force a roll call vote. I bet Rand Paul, maybe a senator from Texas, might be able to have an objection. Doug, you know some people, make some calls. And then it will go to a roll call vote. I want to see every Republican that puts their name behind the certification of this election. If you believe this was valid and this was fine and you think it should continue, by the way, it's not like you're voting, we're not asking people to vote for Biden. It's not about that. It's, are you putting your blessing as a United States Senator as the final step of approval, saying that this election was not one that deserves at least a deeper form of questioning? That's basically the last step. The Supreme Court is basically signaled in motion based on this interstate lawsuit we saw with Texas. Supreme Court doesn't want anything to do with this. The chance of the Supreme Court taking this up is they're going to keep on kicking this down. That's what they told us, okay? And you could be disappointed, you can be mad about it. That's the state of it. The other circuit court stuff, I'm going to just tell you guys, no judge is going to overturn this at this point, okay? It's just not going to happen. Now, long term, through discovery and civil suits and all that, we can end up discovering a lot, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't be persistent, we shouldn't be focused on all of it, but the last step is the United States Senate. So we can kind of see what happens there, and I would be very, very interested to see where a lot of these Republicans that asked for our support, asked for our help, all of a sudden will be when we put them, say, okay, are you going to certify this election? And by the way, I am just skimming the beginning of the surface of exactly what I could talk. I could do, there's so many, the other part of voter fraud that I could talk about, which is just as important, is who actually counts the votes and how they count the votes. And as Jackie showed us in the video, is all of a sudden they have this box of ballots that they find underneath the table in the middle of the night when all the other vote watchers go, election judges go home. It goes on and on and on with all of this and all these very convenient vote dumps that happen in the middle of the night. But unfortunately, this is the broader picture, is that when we as Republicans and conservatives were doing our best to actually focus on politics, they were focused on process and personnel. And this is the bigger takeaway, is that politics matters a lot less than the personnel and the process. And Democrats being more likely to be lawyers than Republicans, it's just true. The Democrats are way more in the legal world than Republicans are. They have a love affair with the process. And most importantly, how they can make the process work for them. The vote tabulation, the voter registration, all these different sorts of things. In addition to also the personnel. Who is actually making these decisions? Well, they've gotten heavily involved in that. And that's why Soros put in hundreds of millions of dollars the last couple decades to the Secretary of States, to the Attorney Generals, to all these different levels of governments to try and not have investigations actually occur. And so I know a lot of you guys are apprehensive. And so here's the thing that we kind of have to say out loud, is that Joe Biden might become president of the United States. I said might. I didn't say he will. I'm not going to do that thing where it's going to happen assuredly or definitively. And so once you get your shell shock over, then let's talk about what that actually means. What that actually means is that any sort of hope, dream that you have that we're going to return to how things used to be, we're going to enter the most brutal collision course in American history that very well, it's post-Civil War, I could say. They're not going to stop. They will never stop. These people want full and complete institutional control, and they want to make America in their image. They've told us what that looks like, and that goes from the indoctrination of your children to the closure of your churches to the mandatory vaccinations to the opening of your borders. That's just the beginning for them. And so then what do we actually do about that if that ends up happening? Well, here's the good news, is that I actually think the people are with us. I think that this is the most artificial power grab in American history, and we should never stop saying that. We have to prove it, we have to say it, we have to repeat it. The people are actually with us. Most importantly, we made record gains with blacks and Hispanics, unless they live in certain counties that matter. Rio Grande Valley, what happened here in Texas in the Rio Grande Valley is a fire alarm for Democrats. You guys do that again, you're going to run this state for the next 100 years. It's that simple. What happened in the Rio Grande Valley is a sign of hope in this state. And why did it happen? It happened because we actually didn't listen to the GOP consultant class that told you what to do in this state, like the Bush people in this state. I know that's a heresy to say in this neighborhood. I don't care. So anyway, yeah. Oh, well, there you go. They say this. They say, get weak on immigration, don't talk about social issues, talk about amnesty, and all the Hispanics will love you. When in reality, the opposite is true. If you talk about strong immigration, fairness, be unapologetically pro-life, talk about religious values, entrepreneurship, and then take a stance against the lockdowns, Hispanics, very much small business owners, all of a sudden you're going to win in historic fashion. And the Democrats are puzzled and they say, what on earth is all this? And they're realizing that Hispanics don't want the hyper-racialization of American politics either. Hispanics don't want all of a sudden all these different type of corporate-funded social movements where your judge of how good of a person you are is whether or not you have a BLM sign outside of your 19,000 square foot home in Highland Park, Texas. Like, we got it. You're a wonderfully good person. Like, thank you for, I wish I could be as good of a person as you are. It's true. And actually, normal people, which the Hispanics in this country have, they are more likely to work with their hands, oil and gas. So you say you're going to abolish oil and gas, good luck winning the Rio Grande Valley. They're more likely to work in what I call the muscular economy, not the Zoom and Skype economy. Hispanics and blacks are more likely to be the ones that are wearing the masks to deliver you your packages, while you go complain and say, we need to go lock down the country for 9 months. Many Hispanics in the Rio Grande Valley can't survive a lockdown another 30 days, let alone another 30 months. And so all of a sudden this started to kind of transform itself into the exact opposite than what the GOP consultant class would tell you how to win Hispanics and blacks over in this state. That should be a lesson for the rest of the country. And you guys should be proud of that, because this state was on the chopping block. And despite, there is one troubling trend here, but it's actually not that troubling, and I'll tell you that in a sec. Despite all of that, Texas stayed red. You did not lose the state house. You guys won congressional seats that you did not think you were going to win, and you won some even more convincingly. Now, what is the one troubling trend here in Texas? The one trend of where something all of a sudden isn't going the way you thought it would go. It's upper middle class whites that live in this neighborhood have decided to engage in the politics of self-loathing. And that's what, and by the way, go do it. This is what the Democrat Party is about to become. And this is the opportunity for Republicans. We're going to go represent the muscular class. You go represent the ruling class and the people that are much more interested in what pronoun you call them and whether or not you have all the correct he, she, is, her, whatever all that nonsense I have to deal with when I go on college campuses. Here's the point, is that this area here, and you guys know this, has become a pseudo-Beverly Hills. And is becoming it that way culturally, politically, and all that other. It is incredibly unpopular with normal people. No, seriously. It is to engage in the type of nonsense that is now seeping into your communities here will actually be the death of the Democrat Party. They will become the ambassadors of the 1% and the representatives of the permanently government addicted, and we will win 90% of the rest of the country. That's the future of politics if we play our cards right. If we get right, I see Tommy here, on education with school choice. We do not abandon, by the way, the not so secret is that most of the country actually believes in strong family values. I know this is a really crazy thing to believe, but this kind of social metropolitanism that is now seeping into the upper middle class of our country, where they're like, I want to be pro-choice and fiscally conservative. I'm like, that's actually not the way you win over value voters in the Rio Grande Valley. That's how you go win over your cocktail party crowd, because that's all you hang out with. But actually, our generation is the most pro-life generation in American history. Despite what, my daughter who goes to NYU says all of her friends are liberal. Precisely. That's not the country. That is a very small microcosm of a type of living that they want to implement for the rest of the country. So what do we actually do? I could talk politically and unpack all this. Politically is that the generic thing you're going to hear a lot of people is fight, fight, fight. But what does that actually mean? There is this obsession that we have, and all of us indulge in it. We got to cut it off immediately in almost building people up just to watch them fall. We do this all the time. And this is what internet culture has done, and it's awful. It's terrible. Basically, there's somebody that we get behind, we like seeing it, and then something unfortunate happens, and we kind of all celebrate the demise. And we as conservatives have to understand that now the left, they want to take us all out. They want to take out our organizations, our institutions, our leaders, our spokespeople, our radio hosts, our TV show hosts. They get personal, they'll follow you. It's going to get nasty. So let's start to think, how can I all of a sudden write on a piece of paper the 5 or 6 good guys, people, not institutions, human beings, people like Candace Owens, people like James O'Keefe, people that you can actually talk to, that you can speak to, and you say, I'm going to pray for them, I'm going to support them, I'm going to lift them up. Because I'm going to tell you right now, this fight is all of a sudden, it's going to be like Gideon's army in the Bible. People are going to flee like you can never believe. Because this fight, this collision course that we're coming for, is not going to be something that anyone here in this room has lived through. It's not. It will be, I pray it remains nonviolent, a nonviolent metaphorical civil war in this country. Rush Limbaugh was exactly right last week, and no one wants to talk about it. What Rush Limbaugh said is, how can you have a country where you have people that don't agree on anything? What do we have in common with the people from San Francisco who are now moving here to Highland Park? Nothing. We have a unified currency. That's it. We don't have culture. We don't have language. You don't have a shared history. Newsflash, you don't have a country. You don't. And the problem is that they have a theological obsession with actually destroying us. It's not enough that we think differently and that bothers them. It bothers them that we think at all. It bothers them that we dare have an opinion, that we speak into existence. The most intolerant people on the planet are the people that drive their Priuses around with their tolerance bumper stickers. They're the first one to go around that say that white silence is violence and there's you're spreading hate speech and I need to kick you off social media because of all that. And so, yeah, it's going to become a brutal battle. It is. If Joe Biden gets sworn in. Anyone who tries to tell you about how nice it's going to be and, our best days are ahead. Our best days might be ahead, by the way. But we're about to enter into some serious fighting times. And it's not for everyone. I'm built for this. We're built for this at Turning Point. We are. We've been fighting these people for years on college campuses. All of a sudden, now we live on a massive college campus, so you get to go see what I have to deal with. You get to all of a sudden, when you go to Starbucks, you get to see the same tyrant that I have to deal with enforce the stupid mask policy if it's not on correctly. Welcome to the college campusization of America is what's happening. You get the pronouns wrong and the right signs. What happened on UT Austin is now happening everywhere. So people are like, I don't recognize this country. You're right, you shouldn't. Because they have conquered, without ever firing a shot, most of the American culture. So how do we actually win? Well, we win in a couple different ways. We have to admit that we're in a battle and a struggle. I think you all get that, right? You support the good guys, the people, the human beings to rise up against it. You have to be honest about how this is going to be long and drawn out. But here's the good news, and here's the best news of all, is that their positions that they are taking are so unbelievably radical and unpopular that if we metaphorically hold the line, they will not be in political power for long. They won't. And we saw that. We saw that on a local state level that they were not able to do it. Now, a lot of this has to now get into the mechanical fights of how we tabulate votes and all this. But even deeper on a cultural sense, here's the other thing that I encourage all of you to do. Think way bigger than you're thinking right now. My biggest complaint of the conservative movement is we think way too small. Way too small. You know how the left thinks and stuff like this? If they had, the communist women of Park City or whatever it is, right, the social justice warrior thing, whatever they do around here, right? Like, please take my money because somebody called me a racist, whatever they do around here, right? So, you know what they talk about? They talk about massive moonshot stuff. They're like, we're going to end racism. Like, that's a pretty ambitious goal. Like, that's like the biggest goal. It's basically like sending, we are going to end sin, is what it's like it's saying. That's what they're saying. You think about it, racism is a sin. It's an awful sin, but that's how big they think. Everything down there kind of seems achievable, right? If you come from the opening shot of we are going to end hatred of human beings one to the other, and the next thing is like we're going to take over every single university, you're like, yeah, I think I can do that. We as conservatives don't think big enough. We don't. And so what does that actually mean? Well, we say at Turning Point every single day, we want our kids to love America again. It's that simple. I want 7- and 8-year-olds to be more fired up about their country than their 30-year-old parents. I want 30-year-old parents to have to go to their 7- and 8-year-olds and saying, I know Thomas Jefferson was amazing. I got it. Now please go eat your dinner. I want young people to be so on fire for their country that the older generations have to keep them in check. That's what I want. How do you get there? Well, we have to be honest about what the problem actually is. Again, I know I'm over time, so I apologize. But what is one of the reasons we did this, and this will be the final segment of what I'm talking about, is that we got the year 1989 and 1991, we screwed it up terribly. I was born in 93. What happened in 1989 and 1991 was heroic, it was wonderful, but we handled it so unbelievably incorrect. We're now living through the consequences of it. What happened in 89 and 91? 89, the Berlin Wall fell. 91, the dissolution of the Soviet Union. We won. We didn't act like winners. We didn't. You know what H.W. Bush said to his aides when the Berlin Wall fell? They said, sir, do you want to give a speech? He said, I don't want to rub it in. That's what he said. What an unbelievably dreadful, generationally impactful mistake. Throughout the 60s, 70s, and 80s, we had children hiding underneath desks in school against nuclear death. We had entire civilizations that very well could have been toppled. We won the war because of ideology. We had better ideas. It's that simple. We rose up, got Ronald Reagan, industrial might, all these sorts of things. Nikita Khrushchev in 1961, when he sent a man to space, you know what Nikita Khrushchev said? He said, when our astronaut went to space, he looked around to find God, and he found him nowhere. Taunting us of our belief in God and not a belief in just the Soviet Union as the top power. They were taunting us theologically, religiously, spiritually, politically, and we won. We won. It's the greatest military victory post-World War II. And it was different because we won it in a different way. We won it because we unified in the 1980s. We believed in the American experiment. We taught our history. We rose up, had a wonderful leader. And what did his vice president and predecessor did? Nothing. So what ended up happening? We just kind of took the 1990s off, is what we did. We kind of had like a moderate Democrat, corrupt, philandering president, and we just didn't kind of care and kind of raised, that's when I grew up. And what did they do? You think the Soviet communists stopped? They took over every single one of the colleges you send your kids to. They now write all the textbooks. They took over our mega corporations. And after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, while we weren't even like doing a victory lap, H.W. Bush should have traveled Europe to every single country with Ronald Reagan and given a speech in Hungary and in Bulgaria and in Latvia and Estonia and Lithuania and told them all, you are now free because of us. And it would have been it would have been a cornerstone speech for the entire country. Instead, you just kind of allowed it to happen. He gave a couple speeches here and there, but it wasn't the triumphant, we won for a specific reason. Now, what's the consequence of that? The consequence is what we're living through right now. We're living through all of the Soviets that used to be concentrated in either Rhodesia, Zimbabwe, Cuba, all this. They all came here, and they plotted, and they thought really big, and they found the financing to do it. George Soros, Tom Steyer, and they realized, and they learned along the way, they tried the economic thing. This is what no one understands. You remember Occupy Wall Street? It was an unbelievable failure. They tried to create a class war in this country, and they failed. And then they went back, and they said, what is the one thing that we can talk about that can create the conflict we need to get us power? Race. Race and gender. Class wars don't work in America. Why? Because markets work so well that people just get richer each year. They're like, yeah, I get this whole hate the rich thing, but I actually live a pretty comfortable life and I'm thankful. But all of a sudden when you start talking about race and gender, there's paralysis. Because we never taught our children the correct race and gender history of our country. And the opposite. They go to university, they go to elementary school, and they learn nothing except that we're racist, bigoted, homophobic, colonialist, awful. By the time you're 14 or 15, it's a question of how do we revolutionize this awful place around us? And Khrushchev bragged about this in 1959. He says, you guys don't understand that your children and your grandchildren will be living in communism and we're going to feed it to you bit by bit. The one piece that they missed, though, was how they were going to do it. So what are the institutions that do this? Happy to go at length about this. Colleges are basically ruining America. It's that simple. If we don't cut the college population in half in the next decade, we won't have a country. I know this is not exactly popular to talk about in Highland Park. When I talk about this in Odessa, everyone's cheering, they're screaming, they're loving it. Everyone's kind of like, what are you talking about here? Look, I'm going to be as blunt as I possibly can. I'm probably talking too fast anyway, but here. We have a generation of young people that are borrowing money they don't have to study things that don't matter, to find jobs that don't exist. Your child does not need to go to college to succeed. Now, if they want to become a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, terrific. College should not be a place for ideological discovery. Really bad place to do that. College has become the number one reason why my generation is financially in a worse position than the generation before it. They got a meaningless piece of paper and $65,000 in debt and tons of bad ideas weaponized for revolution. And then they get stuck in urban cities. They don't marry. They have all these secular humanist ideas where they learn evangelistically that there is no God, and yet we continue to repeat these mistakes. So the purpose of higher education should be about career development, not necessarily ideological exploration. And so thinking big, really big, would be, why do we need these massive, inflated, corrupt, left-wing institutions anymore? Like, what are we doing? Why are we giving our donations to these schools? Why are our Republican governors not demanding answers from A&M or UT Austin? And I could go chapter and verse of stuff that would just make every single person here upset. Now, I know a lot of you say, well, Charlie, what are they supposed to do then? Well, I could tell you, we import immigrants to go do the jobs they don't want to do, to go be computer engineers, to go get an 18-month degree in computer coding, or we have a nationwide shortage with plumbers, HVAC, welders, carpenters, people that serve and work with their hands. But here's the honest truth, and I'm just going to be as blunt as I can. In this neighborhood, that's not considered to be a nice profession. It's not. In Highland Park, your kid goes to UT Austin to go work in the information economy. And it's more socially acceptable for the kid to go to UT Austin and go work in the information economy and maybe be like pseudo-employed than to go get a plumbing degree and then go earn $80,000 a year. But no one actually wants to go tell their neighbor, yeah, XYZ is a plumber. That's a big part of the problem, is the social status of what your kids actually do. And no one wants to talk about it. And so it's time to think big and fight. This is going to be, I'm in some ways, I'm excited. I'm Scottish. I love fighting. It's in my blood. We've been doing it for many hundreds of years, and we're really good at it. And so I got some skulls over there. It's very good. So look, there's so many different things I could cover here. I'll close with this, which is a lot of people are going to be asking, what can I materially do? Act as if what you do makes the difference that you wish other people would make. And so everything that you do in this political and cultural fight absolutely matters. Everything that you do. The $50 you give to a group, the prayers, the church you attend to, I could do a whole other speech on that, but everything you do. And here's the really cool thing. If you've run out of things to do, go learn. It's the greatest use of time. And this is what excites me more than anything else. This is why I think in the end we will win, is that there's a renaissance of learning, the likes of which I've never seen before. My podcasts, our radios, the long episodes we do, people that want to all of a sudden say, hold on a second, what is this critical race theory that my kids are learning? And moms especially are now becoming the guardians of our culture. No offense to the dads or the husbands. They're actually way less informed than the moms across the country. No, seriously. It's the moms and the women that are all of a sudden coming with alert. They're saying, I'm not all of a sudden going to say that my kid needs to be mandatorily vaccinated to go attend a school. Like, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. If you run out of things to do, go learn. Wisdom will give you the instruction of where to go in these times. Where do you find wisdom? Of course, in Proverbs, the Bible, the great thinkers that built our entire society. And then you take that knowledge into action. Once you put that knowledge into action, that's exactly how we're going to win. They're entering a moment, the left and the Democrats, where they inevitably, if Joe Biden becomes president, they are going to enter into a Democrat civil war, the likes of which they are not prepared for. The corporate Democrats are going to fight the radical Democrats. I believe we are going to be unbelievably united around this. And there will be a lot of stuff that we're not going to like to see. When they close the embassy in Jerusalem, when they redo the Iran deal, all that stuff, it's going to be tough. What do? You learn. You dive deeper, and then that will give you the knowledge what to do, and then you act. And you knock on the doors, you become a precinct committee person, and all of that. And so that's what we're doing every single day at Turning Point USA and Turning Point Action. And I guess my time is up. You guys are awesome. Thank you. Okay.
Wasn't he magnificent? Thank you so much, Charlie. Do not leave, because we have some gifts for Charlie, and one's a fun one and one is a very serious one. So, Charlie, we want you to move to Texas. So I think you should get an apartment here. But let me just give you this first gift. Okay, this is a flag that has flown over the Capitol, the state capitol in Texas, from Representative Morgan Meyer, and so that's the certificate. Hold this. Don't open it yet. Okay. So we started a tradition with Park City's Republican Women. I hope the 2021 board will continue this, but we want to make you an honorary Texan. And so there's something here that I think you will enjoy wearing. And it has a lot to do with what we do here in Texas. So we also thank you for keeping Texas red, but this is a memento of Texas. So wherever you wear these, and you can go ahead and open. So they have the Lone Star of Texas on the boots. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your patronage. And there are several people, thank you. But those of you who missed the photo opportunity, who were VIP patrons because Charlie had to go to his interview with Martha McCallum, if you'll make your way over to what we call the East Room, which is just where Joe is sitting, we're going to open up the photo opportunity in there. And then we have a special, photo opportunity for the members of our club who join at the Friends level, and so we're going to offer you an exclusive opportunity to have your photo taken with Charlie as well. So anyway, thank you.
And before everyone leaves the room, I'm Nancy Mello with Park City's Republican Women, and I'm a board member this year. I'm vice president of programs. And it's been a real pleasure working with Lane Sullivan this past year. I'm here on behalf of the board to say thank you to Lane. Lane, you've done an amazing job as president. She's been president for the past 2 years. Lane was very instrumental in putting this evening together, so thank you so much, Lane. I'd also like to say Lane has been a member of PCRW for 11 years and has held many important roles. And it's because of Lane that we have over 300 women or members of Park City Republican Women. So thank you so much, Lane, and we have a gift here for you.
Thank you. Something else very important, and then I promise you we'll wrap this up. Lisa Luby Ryan designed the beautiful centerpieces on the table, and these are $75 donation. And there's an envelope on your table so you can put your cash, your credit card, or your check in there. But these make wonderful gifts for your friends. And so you can pay for those right where you checked in and picked up your name tags. So while you're waiting for the valet, you can purchase a centerpiece. And so the last thing I want to tell you is that we use our money wisely in PCRW, so please drop your name tags off when you leave so we can use those again. And I think that about covers everything. So thank you all. Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah. Thank you so much for being here. Oh, sorry. One more thing. And I apologize for not saying this sooner. A percentage of tonight's proceeds are going to be donated to Turning Point USA, to the Young Women's Leadership Summit that I talked about, that is near and dear to my heart, but we are going to support that event, and that is in June, this 2021. So good night. Thank you very much. And again, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah.